So, yeah, so we are going to be recording. Tonight is all about Albariño, and I was so excited to receive some messages from people saying, one, I've never heard of that grape, and I'm excited to learn more, and two, I love that grape and that wine, and I want to come on and learn more because it's primarily grown in Spain. And what makes it amazing is it's so easy to find. For those who have been on my wine calls, you have noticed that a lot of times we start in the old world, and a lot of times the varietals are not listed on the label. And so, like, if you're looking for a Grenache or whatever from France, it's not going to say that on the label. However, if you're looking for an Albariño from Spain, it's going to say it on the label. So Albariño is indigenous to Spain, in particular the Galician coast. So if you can throw up the slide real quick, the second slide, you can skip past the first one. So we'll just put a map up so you can see where we are. Here's the map of Spain. And there's a cursor. So we're looking at the very far northeast area is Galicia, is how they pronounce it in Spain. The CI is like a so Galicia. And then go to the next slide. Rías Baixas is the predominant region where Albariño is its best. And Rías Baixas basically translates to the four rivers that dominate the region. So if you can see off the Atlantic coast, you see four rivers that are coming in off the coast. And so that's extremely influential in the wines there. The grape is a workhorse in that area. You can exit out of there. They can handle a lot of these strong Atlantic storms. Soils there are, you think about, I see Mike here, he's at the beach and it's sand. The soils there are predominantly sandy soils, mixed with some granite. The vines, which will show you some fabulous pictures once I introduce our guest speaker, they are trellised. And so what that means is they're lifted, and that is to allow airflow. And I'm going to let my guest speaker, Brooke, who's here to talk more about that. Before we transition to that, I'll just say, like, one thing you'll notice if you love Albariño, or if it's new to you, it's like a nice alternative to Pinot Grigio. It's known for like its freshness. You get a lot of like really like apricot kind of flavors mixed with like citrus flavors. This is generally speaking of the Spanish Albariño. And they're unoaked. Traditionally, they're unoaked. Some modern style producers are coming in and putting in some oak into the wine just to try to give it some more complexity. You are seeing more natural winemakers kind of making different styles with the wine as well. And I won't get into that too much. But it pairs, like the food pairing. Like Albariño is just one of the best wines that you can pair. Like if you're a vegetarian, it's going to pair with a lot of the foods that you make. It does great with green veggies. It also, if you're a pescatarian or if you love fish, it's fantastic because you think about when we saw the map where we are, we're on the Atlantic coast. And so what are they eating? Well, they're eating a lot of fish. It also does well with a lot of
pork. They eat a lot of pork.
I know. I was just going to say anything salty. Pork is salty. Like this is a fattier style white wine that is going to pair well with saltier style foods. It also has bright acidity, higher level acidity, so it's also going to do well with a lot of like buttery style fish dishes that, like, for example, we're having shrimp scampi tonight. So with that, I'm going to introduce a dear friend and colleague of mine, Brooke. She and I was just like, when did we meet? And literally, like, it was in 2010. It was in 2010. So we've known each other for a decade. And
yeah, it was when I was with Oatly. No, it wasn't when I was
Robert Oatly.
Yeah,
and,
okay.
Yep. And so, and like, total badass. Like, this is why I loved her from the second, like, she came up and spoke to, it's when you came to Henry Wine Group and you spoke in front of us, and I was just like, she and I are gonna get along.
Always daunting.
Yeah, and just like the passion that she has, and she loves to travel, and she loves food, and she loves wine. And the reason why, like, we connected, aside from those things, is like we love to like educate the consumer and our friends, and do it in like a non, like, we're not snobs. We're not snobs at all. Exactly. And I lived in Napa when I met her, and I was in that's the snobbiest wine region to try to sell wine. And she worked for an Australian company.
I have no idea.
It was just like the most,
it
was a difficult region. Like, nobody cared about Australian wine, but she crushed it. She crushed it. And so anyway, so I just wanted to introduce her, and she's amazing. And I'm going to but give her the whatever. To talk about, because she lived in Spain for a while and traveled all throughout, and shared some amazing photos that we're going to show you of the vines. So you let us know when you want to share the photos.
I will do that.
Yeah.
So, hello, everybody. I would like to, I think Nicole asked me tonight because this is one of my absolute favorite region in Spain. And I lived in Spain for about 3 years. And actually, my top region I wanted to travel to was Rías Baixas, because my favorite wine from Spain is Albariño from Rías Baixas. And ironically, just before I was about ready to visit Rías Baixas, I met a Gallego, a man from Galicia. And we ended up falling in love, getting engaged, and that's why I ended up staying in Spain for all those years. So I was able to go to Rías Baixas, in the heart of Rías Baixas. And there's a lot of interesting things about this region. I don't get geeky with my wine stuff. For me, it's about the area, the people, and just keeping it simple, like a little bit of interesting information, but nothing too geeky. There are a lot of little sub-regions in Rías Baixas. We don't need to know that. But the most important thing about this region is that it's in the northwest corner of Spain, on the coast of Spain. It's really close to Portugal. If you go north 2 hours, you're in. Yeah, that is called Vigo, and it's more like Portuguese than it is like Spanish. So that tells you a lot about this region. They speak a language that is more like Portugal than Spain. They've always been really removed and sort of up here alone on their own in this rugged, cold, northern territory. And that has a lot to do with their culture and sort of why they've remained a bit separated. Some would say a little behind the times. I would say preserved. They're also one of the poorest regions in Spain, economically speaking, because they have that the rest of Spain seems to receive, particularly when it comes to European Union funding, etc. An exception to that is Rías Baixas. So this region was never in history. They made wine, but they made wine at home, just for fun. They grew grapes, like a lot of regions in Europe. It only became really a quality-driven region closer to the 80s, and it was qualified and given a qualification of DOC in 1988. So it's sometimes referred to as the New World region of Spain, and Spain is the Old World. But it's a really relatively recent commercial endeavor in Spain. So from the beginning, when they were starting commercial wineries, everything was able to be modernized from step one. It's not like France, where you've had commercial wineries for hundreds of years and they're updating. These guys started with modern winemaking technology in the 80s. So it's a really, really interesting region, because when you draw from thousands of years ago that used to store grain, but then when you go to wineries, they're really modern in their winemaking technology, which is a good thing, because this is white wine, and it's really important to keep these grapes cool and the juice cool when you're making it, and they could not have done that before modern winemaking technology. It would have been really oxidized and funky, sugary, sour. It would be basically exactly like what you'll get if you go to my ex-boyfriend's family's house or anybody in Galicia that makes wine at home. It tastes like crap.
Yeah.
But it's disgusting. But that's what you would have found if you found Albariño before modern winemaking technology. Now they can pick grapes, put them in a truck, feed them to the winery. They can use cooling mechanisms on the way, and as soon as they get there, they can do cold fermentation to keep those flavors preserved, and prevent oxidization. So
that's really important, like keeping the grapes transferred at a cool temperature really is really important component to making like world-class wine. You know, when your grapes during transfer, if they're like, you know, fluctuating in temperature, you know, that's not a happy grape. Like if you think about when I go out into my husband and like our garden, when am I harvesting? Like I'm harvesting like early in the morning. Like I'm not going out there at like, you know, like dead afternoon when it's been like 95 degrees here in the afternoon. No, I'm out there in the morning, and so is he. And we're like working away at like our little garden. And
there's actually, we won't go into it because this is not what this call is about, but there's another little winemaking region in the larger region of Galicia that makes red wine, and it's a very, very small percentage of what this entire region makes, and they do not have the technology that Rías Baixas has, and you do see a lot of
right
baskets on their back, super steep vineyards, and then they're like walking those grapes to the cellar, and by the time they get there, they're like baked and bleeding, and it's not good. So Rías Baixas has a lot going for it from a technology modernization standpoint, but it's also a spectacular region from nature standpoint. It's beautiful. There's crashing waves and cliffs. It's like the Northern California of Spain. It's not your hot San Diego beaches. It's a little bit colder, and it's part of what we call green Spain, which means it's a part of Spain that gets the most rainfall out of the entire country. And there's like a belt, and it includes some of Galicia, Asturias, and some of Basque Country. And
which
these
is
are very
important,
beautiful regions.
And which is important in how they trellis the vines is because of the weather. And if you could go to slide 3, I think it is, like these are slides from Brooke.
From my trip.
It's just so different, like how the vines, like they're a canopy is basically what it is. I don't know if you can expand that a little.
There's a couple more pictures too with a couple other vineyards similarly to give you a sense of how high these and then we walk underneath the vineyards during our entire tour of the vineyard.
So beautiful. So is there a story, Brooke, with the, you know, this is a magical photo. I just love it. I love this photo. You know, I know you were at a particular...
This is at Palacio Pepiñanes.
But also, like, the reason why these are trellised is, like, you know, do you want to talk about the weather, like, aside from the fact, like,
So you don't, what I noticed, and I only learned this after living in Spain, is that you actually see, this was the first time I had been in vineyards that were trained like this. And when we say trained, we mean the direction that they train the vine. So, you know, you're going through Napa Valley and Sonoma County, and honestly, most regions in the world, except for when you have old vines. Like last week, we saw Châteauneuf-du-Pape with the old trees. You see that with old vines everywhere. You see that in Sonoma County as well with Zinfandel sometimes. But you almost never see these high-trained vines. And this is something you see specifically near the coast in cool weather areas. And this is already unique on its own because cool weather areas near the coast aren't big wine growing regions when you generally speaking. You get a lot of hot coastal areas that grow wines that probably shouldn't, and sometimes they're fine. But what's really interesting is they have two of these areas in Spain, and the other one is you have these real high overhead trained vines. And the purpose for this type of vine training is that it's supposed to improve the circulation of air flowing underneath the vines. So because you have a slightly, it's not a humid climate, but there is a lot of rain. And rain brings humidity, which can cause mold. The more air circulation you have, the less chance you're going to get mold, right? So they bring the vines up high, they give it all this space so that the wind, and there's a lot of wind in Galicia, will whip through and circulate and keep these vines dry. What's really interesting is that in most of the wines, as long as you're getting it from the cooler regions and not from the hotter regions of Rías Baixas, you get a little bit of salinity, like a little bit of salt in the wine. It's like you can taste the air and the region, which is what I love. You should be able to taste that if you are wineries that are a little bit too commercial, or it's from one of the hotter sub-regions where it just gets too flat and flabby. So start reading your bottles, but my favorite, personally, my favorite region out of the 5 little regions is Val do Salnés, and that is the one that's really cool. It's closer to Pontevedra, to San Sencho, and these other little coastal areas.
So it's like really crazy. So like for those that have been on these journeys with me with these calls, I've talked about, you know, a general area, but then we dial into, like we did last week with like the Southern Rhone, but like so we could do this with just Rías Baixas. It's crazy. Yeah. Like this is how like intense like wine can get, but we want to make it fun, you know, like how do I, you know, but what you generally will just see on the market, it'll just say Rías Baixas.
Exactly.
From Spain. So is that any questions, anything? Like, I think Brooke is also going to talk about like the food from Rías Baixas that is.
And I will just say one thing, because I don't like to get too complicated, and don't know the subregions of Rías Baixas. It's just too much. But one note I will make is that if you want to stay away from the flabby, kind of hotter climate Albariños, just don't get the Rosal area. Rosal, for me, just if you see Rosal on the bottle in the back of where it was grown, I would stay away from that area. It's a little bit flabbier, a little bit warmer weather, and you get less crispness and acidity.
Yeah, we'll put that in the comments if you can. When you're done. No reason. Yeah. We have a small group tonight, as you can see.
And I'm going to type in a couple notes of my favorite wineries. I've been to a lot of wineries.
Perfect. And if you could, spell out the regions, all that stuff is super helpful.
Has anybody traveled to this region of Spain? Do you want to?
Yes. Well, I want to do like a San Sebastian surf trip combined with the Basque Country and exploring the wines there, and then go over to Rías Baixas and then dip into Portugal because you can surf there as well. So surfing there is amazing. I'm hoping maybe one day we can put together a little like wine surf trip.
I would love to.
Ooh.
My mom can take care of the dog.
Yeah, and you know me, Nicole. Basque Country and Galicia are my 2 favorite regions of Spain. Basque for the food, Galicia for the wine and the coast. And for the fact that it's dirt cheap and it's not touristy.
Exactly. It is not at all. I mean, San Sebastian is a little bit touristy, but anyway, we won't go off on that tangent. So we'll go back to Rías Baixas and talk about like the food, because it's like, so Albariño is one of these grapes. I find it to be a fantastic cocktail wine, but I also find it to be something like, if you're a vegetarian, this is your white wine. This wine is going to pair with a lot of different vegetables and some of those pesky greens. And it's also going to pair with like a lot of fish if you're a pescatarian. Like if you eat light, you know, So I talked to us, Brooke, about like the food that you ate when you were in.
Yeah. Well, first I'll say if you're a vegetarian, you are not going to have an easy time in Spain or Galicia. You're going to find very, very little for you.
And they're true, but the wine, if you're in America and that's your life,
it's going to go great in the U.S. But if you're in Galicia, forget it. If you're looking for lots of vegetables, at the most, the two things you will find ever, I've never seen anything else.
Ham and bread.
Blistered peppers drenched in olive oil, or a salad drenched in olive oil. And it has lettuce, and it has tomatoes, and it has maybe an onion. And that's it. And then the rest of it is seafood, pork, steak, potatoes. This is a very basic area. These people are generally speaking laborers or factory workers, fishermen. It's not a wealthy area, but because they do get a lot of stuff out of the sea, of course, seafood is a big part of their diet. But a misconception from tourists is that Galicians are eating seafood every day, and the reality is they can't afford to. It's still more expensive than pork or eggs or bread. So what they eat at home is like empanadas con atún, which is empanadas filled with tuna, which they can in Galicia. They have a lot of factories where they tin seafood in Galicia. Or they have a lot of bread and eggs, rice and eggs, very sort of peasant-y type food. But on their Sunday dinners and anytime they go out with their family, you will see mejillones or mussels. You will see pulpo, which is octopus grilled, and you will see every other kind of seafood. And they get really excited about their meals when they have that special meal with all the seafood. And what their regional dish, the thing that is like eponymous with Galicia, a much meatier, heavier seafood dish. So that actually shows you what Albariño is perfect with, because Albariño is a medium-bodied white wine. It's not super light. It has enough body to carry off pork or a heavier seafood like pulpo with oil. So, it's a great food.
There we are. Hi, Jenny. We have a new.
I think she's on mute.
Yeah, I think so. Or maybe he's trying to get on here.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know. Are there any questions about, I don't know, I guess food? Maybe I'll just give a couple of facts about the region that might be interesting.
Yeah, I think this is like really spectacular because one thing that I really want to do with some of these is try to help people with food and wine pairings. I mean, it's something that I get asked a lot. What would you pair with this? What would you do with this? And I think when you understand the region, and that's something I always talk about, it's such an amazing story with Rías Baixas, is that they are, the food, the seafood, and that the fact that they can most of it. So they're just basically doing it a lot for like the export market, or preserve.
Well, they love preserved seafood, so they do it for themselves too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They like that salty, and like I feel like Albariño, because it's a more like generally like medium-bodied, fattier style white wine, it's going to pair really well with like salty, like fish or something salty, like not a salt. I mean, I hate to be so intense when I'm saying salty, but
it goes so well with salty food, because when you get a great Albariño, you should taste the region and you should have a touch of salinity. Like, it doesn't taste salty, as you and I know, but that touch of salinity, it's you find it in lots of wines like Gascogne Blanc, right? But there's just a touch, and then it's white and it's bright and it's peaches and it's stone fruit and it's crisp, but it's all pork at a tavern in Galicia. You can have an Albariño and it's perfect.
Totally. And I think like, a lot of folks maybe not be into anchovies, but when you have like the albino anchovies, which are my favorite, they're so light, but they have just that touch of like saltiness and sea-ness. So Dave's making a face. Yeah. But when you have them paired like with like an Albariño, and I swear if you're sitting outside looking at the sea, like
yeah, I mean, it freaking completely to things. So I speak mostly to Galicia, but when you're in Galicia, it goes perfect with everything. It goes perfect with nothing. It goes perfect with seafood. But you're sitting by the ocean and you're drinking it and you're tasting and smelling the place you're in, and you're in that place. So, and the people are the most humble people you've ever met, and not like people say people are humble in France and famous regions. Let's be real. That's a marketing personality that they put on because they want you to feel like they're humble because they're so famous for so long and it makes them feel awkward. But Galicia is very humble. This is a poor region with the average salary in this area is 12,000 euros a year. Okay. So some people are making $9,000 a year. So this just makes these people are just salt of the earth, basic, nice people. They aren't as warm as other areas in Spain, and this is commented on often, that the Galicians are sometimes seen as cold, which often gets said about northerners in any country, right? Because the weather is colder. But they don't open up as quickly, but they're very, very humble, nice, polite people. And if you know someone who knows someone who's Galician, then that all changes, and then they're very warm.
Hey,
they're not going to come up to you as a stranger and hug you or anything.
Yeah. Thank you. I just noticed Jenny joined in. I wanted to say hello. She's been on us almost since day one. Do you have an Albariño?
I do.
Awesome.
I went to Wally's in Beverly Hills today, and they had 3 of them. But now, of course, I forgot which one I picked. It was in a beautiful blue bottle, and it was the one I was most attracted to anyway. Is that? Yeah, that's the one. Yeah. And then they were like, "We're pouring this, whatever at the bar," and I was like, "Great, I love it. Let's do it."
That's Mar de Fradas.
Awesome. So is it a new grape for you, or?
Yeah. I had no idea. I was like, I'm tasting this new grape tonight. Don't know what it is. Let's see what you got.
Awesome. Well, this is why I love doing this, is because it's just like, let's bring a grape in, whether you've never heard of it or you love it. Let's sit around and talk, I love having Brooke on talking about, the experiences that she had living in Spain and discussing Rías Baixas, and also talking about like food that we can pair with it, because I used to be a vegetarian and then I turned pescatarian, and Albariño was one of those grapes that just sort of like was kind of common ground, if you will. So does anyone have any questions about Spain or about anything? Because I don't want to move on too quickly. We're going to talk about Portugal next, so feel free.
I have a random question. So I had Albariño first. I was getting a seafood curry, and I asked at the restaurant what would go well with it, and they said an Albariño, and I was like, never heard of it, but I had it and I loved it, and I've since bought bottles of wine. And today I got one from Meritage, which is sorry. What happened?
They heard you. They're listening to you.
That's my dad calling me. So I got a wine from them, and I normally don't get Albariños. They had 2. One was the one I got, and the other one they said had an oak to it, which I didn't want to get. I was like, I don't really want to try that. But the thing I noticed is it's got like a massive punt, and it's this giant, and any bottle I've had of Albariño before has been like just a regular bottle. So what's the deal with this?
They're just trying to be cute and clever with their packaging and not succeeding.
Okay. All right. So I just like paid for I was like, that's so weird.
That's a really big
going to talk about the clientele at, certain wine shops. I know Meritage, they're lovely, like that. Their clientele are used to, they have some really high-end buyers, and so they're used to like bottles with like these elaborate shapes with these big punts and stuff. I think that's probably
that is a very eponymous label. You see that in a lot of places. I can't even remember the name, but I've had it, and I think I've even been to that winery. It always is in that bottle, and it's actually all over. It's an online retail shop. So this is not a small producer. You don't ever see that with a small producer. Also, the blue bottle down that Jenny had from Mar de Fradas, that's one of the biggest producers in Rías Baixas. It's massive. They're owned by Freixenet. So,
Freixenet.
I've been to Mar de Frades also. It's a fantastic wine, but it's made by a super big producer. They just happen to do a really good job with that particular wine. It's very crisp. It's very lean. It doesn't have as much of the region in it, but it's very, very lean and nice and clean and fresh.
So again, this goes back to what I always talk about is shopping when you're like Albariño. Obviously, we're going to talk about, we do grow it here in California where I live. But shopping by the back label when you're looking for imports. Don't shop by like a super cute label that attracts you. I mean, it may entice you, but always pick the bottle up and then look and see who the importer is. And, you know, you can do a quick little search on your phone and find out if they're like, you know, like a legit importer or what have you. You know, this at Albariño, you see it. So this bottle is like a classic.
That's what I normally get. That's the one.
Oh, La Caña?
Yeah, I love that one.
Yeah, I mean, it's found everywhere. I mean, it's not my favorite, but it's great. It's found everywhere, and it's a decent price style. It's a decent wine, and it's very representative of what an Albariño is. But you will also see them in more of a Riesling style bottle. This doesn't have a great big punt, you know.
Yeah, I mean, and also there's a couple brands that you can find easily, but they're also not huge, that are pretty good. Not my favorite, but easy to find, but they're good. Like Martin Kodak's. So Martin Kodak's is pretty easy to find.
Owned by the Gallo family. Owned by Gallo.
But it wasn't originally, right? And so it's like for what it costs, it's a nice example. But I have better ones I'll put in the notes. So that everybody can take that home, because I met families and went to these places, and I have to say that I'm happy to say that it happens to coincide with my belief in that we should support family-owned businesses that are smaller, but they also happen to be the best wines that I tasted there. So always support like the family-owned businesses, you know, like, because they're the ones that they're pouring the heart and soul into everything that they're doing, like. Oh yeah, one thing, sorry, before you move on, I just want to say one thing. Most people, before a few years ago, I had never met anyone in the United States that knew what Galicia was. They'd never heard of it. They're like, where is that? What is it? No one knew what it was. It only became popular over the last few years. But one thing you probably have heard of, even if you never heard of Galicia, is the Camino de Santiago. That's that long hike that people go on a pilgrimage in Spain to do. And that is the pilgrimage location is Galicia. So whenever you hear about people going to do the Camino de Santiago, they're pilgrimaging to Santiago de Compostela, which is the main city in Galicia.
Which that's major. Like the treks that they do are insane. Like it's just so special. How's everybody enjoying their wine? Let's talk about it. Does anyone want to talk about specifically what they're enjoying? Is it a new wine? What do you love?
I love Albariño, and you were the one who introduced me to it. And I said this last week on the call, but it's one of those wines where if there's a little bit of a dodgy list, you know, you go to a restaurant or just somewhere and the list has an Albariño on it, it's probably what I would roll the dice on. You know, not that it means it's going to be really good or anything, but they seem very consistent, if that makes sense.
This is usually the one that you'll find on the list too, is this one. That's why I brought this one.
And maybe that's why, is that it's not a huge production. There's not a lot of people who are messing around with it and trying to oak it or whatever. But I've just found that since you introduced it to me, you know, 4 years ago, whatever it was, where if I go somewhere and there's an Albariño and the rest of it, I don't know what it is, or it's a little dodgy, or, you know, maybe it's a lot of stuff that is, you know, from big producers, I'll just go with the Albariño. And, you know, for the most part, that's a pretty good decision. It seems like it's very consistent, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it's, you know, generally it's one of the larger grapes out of Spain, or larger grapes. From northeastern Spain is one of the workhorse grapes, if you will. Production is a little bit bigger, so they're able to, you know, sustain, you know, at longevity, if you will, on wine lists and things like that. And then you also see some of the big companies that have come in and bought up some of the wineries, and they've amped up production. So you have, you know, you will see it as a consistent player, I will say that, on wine lists. But I think it's also, it said earlier, like, it's a really nice alternative to Pinot Grigio. Because Pinot Grigio has, if you were on my tasting or whatever, I'm still a big proponent of it, but traditionally it should be have a little bit more body than what we get in America. I wanted to ask you, Jimmy, what you think of the ones, because you bought 2.
Yeah, I've only opened the one, so I figure I find I get in trouble sometimes when I open 2 bottles, and I have to work all day tomorrow. But yeah, what I've enjoyed about this entire process is, and Dave will vouch for this, like when we were hanging out, or we would go to Italy, or just hang out in general, and he would grab a white wine, I never drank it at all, you know. And so this whole process has been real eye-opening to me, of like, oh, this is what I enjoy. Or this, you know, I'm much more, you know, as I'm getting educated, thinking it's more top of mind now. Like in the past, like in the middle of the day, or even anything with fish, like tonight, you know, having fish or whatever, I wouldn't have thought to grab a white wine. And so, but this, and I wouldn't have known what I enjoy about this, because even when you brought it up, and I was asking you today, I'm like, wait, did I just get that? It wasn't a grape that I was familiar, or a region that I was familiar with, because I don't feel like I drank a lot of wine from Spain at all. And so to me, this has all been like day one education as far as this wine goes. But I see where your comparison goes with something like a Pinot Grigio, and that I enjoy it. It's not over. I forget what week it was where I had the one from New Zealand that was like extremely tart. I felt like I was like sucking a grapefruit down.
Yeah.
Like that would and that was like, it was a great like starter, or if it was like the end of like a dessert or something, I'm having multiple glasses. Like it's a very easy, What
are you drinking? What are you drinking, Jimmy?
Yeah,
Oh, okay. Yeah. I like that one. It's nice.
And this was the one, I had picked one out on the website, and then Nicole, you had given me a name of another one, and they said they didn't have that, but they recommended this one. And so this was the one that Pogo's was like, hey, don't have the one you just sent. They're so great about it. Like, you put it in line and they don't have it, they text you, and they're like, hey, we have another bottle. Well,
so again, this is great. This goes back to like part of why I love doing these little chats, is like sharing these experiences, because you're now not like buying your wine at like Safeway or whatever. You're like, you know, you're getting your wine delivered.
No.
Or you're going to this particular shop where you have like established a relationship. And so they know you now.
That if you give me a wine specific, and I think this is like the second time, they're like, hey, we're actually out of that. But then they can give me something, they're like, here's something similar. Yeah. Like they know what I'm looking for.
If it's a good shop. I mean, that's the most important thing, is a good shop. Yeah. Because we can't really make generalizations about actually importers in every case. Right. Because sometimes there's an importer that Nicole and I don't really like, but occasionally they have some good wines. Right. But the retailer is good and they know what they're doing, they're tasting all these wines.
Yeah.
So I will have to say, though, there's something I disagree with. Dave said, you know, he likes almost all Albariños. I find Albariño to be absolutely one of the riskier propositions in my book. I do not like 50 to 70% of the Albariños I taste, and I do not want to buy them or drink them. So I am very particular about Albariño, and I find are a little too flabby, a little too fat, and they're not really bright, and they don't really give you what you want from Albariño. And because there are tons of producers.
There are, but I think what he was trying to say was, you know, if you're traveling, you might find it to be a safe bet for one thing.
I would pick something else if I want a safe bet, but
on a wine list. So anyway, so we'll move on.
But my mom likes any wine, so she would say probably the same thing. But I would just say be careful if you're really picky, because Albariño can vary greatly. And sometimes it tastes like a Oh, and never buy it if it's more than 2 years from when it was harvested, because they're not making it to be drunk. Really, they're making it to be drunk in the first year after bottling. They're not making it to be held longer. If you're getting it later, it's because they couldn't sell it all, typically. There's not that many exceptions. And as you said, Nicole, nobody's really oaking, but some people are starting to like experiment with it, you know?
They are. They're not the oaked Albariños for me. They just don't do it. It would be like oaking Pinot Grigio. Like, why the fuck would you do that?
But there's a couple examples that are okay. There's a couple like Grand Bazan, you know,
not my style.
No, well, they're not putting oak. They're putting it in neutral cast.
Right, yes, no, I understand.
Yeah, like Grand Bazan, and it's actually very nice.
Yeah, that's fine. All right, well, I'm gonna I'm looking at the time. We're gonna talk about Portugal. Just going to really get in here. So anyone here drinking? I don't think anyone here has a wine from Portugal, do they? Alvarinho, as they pronounce it there. If you could pull up the map, I think it's slide 3 or 4, just so we can get, here we are. So we started, Portugal is obviously tucked next to Spain. And the green area, if you can point your cursor, is actually where Alvarinho, as it's called, in Portugal comes from. And the next slide, I think, might dial it in a little closer. These, if you want to take a screenshot, this is the area in northeastern Portugal where the best Albariño, sorry, I've been talking about Spain for so long. Specifically in this brown area, Mansão and Malgação is where the best Albariño will come from. You can exit out of that. And the same way that we showed those photos earlier, they are trellised just as well, because we're literally just south of Spain. We're on the Atlantic coast. So the vines need to be trained to be held up to allow like airflow to come in to prevent mildew. So bit of the difference between Spain is that most of the wines from Portugal, the white wines, even red wines, and we'll get into Portugal one day, is that it's one of the few that are actually labeled as Albariño. Normally you will just see Vinho Verde, which are delightful wines. Albariño can be blended in that. So just wanted to let you know, like when you see, because Portuguese wine is becoming super trendy, it's not pronounced Vinho Verde. Everybody wants to pronounce it that way. So just a little insider tip that it's Vinho Verde. And Alvarinho, and it's generally a richer style than the Spanish Albariño. So if you want like a little bit more of a masculine style, I would suggest trying to find one from Vinho Verde, labeled as Albariño. It's also going to be a little bit higher in alcohol percentage. That doesn't mean a bad thing. That's a very natural thing from the region. It's pretty damn hot there. So the alcohol percentages are going to naturally be higher.
What do you mean by masculine? I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah. Great question. Sorry. So I say this a lot. For those that have been consistently on my calls, I talk a lot about feminine versus masculine. Masculine. It's just going to be, you know, you think, Brooke is laughing. You think, you know, like when, like, okay, so let me talk, a Riesling, like a light Riesling is like a feminine white wine. You know, like a heavy oaked Chardonnay is like a masculine, you know, does that make sense?
Like Bordeaux versus Burgundy.
Or like for Jen, for you're not a big Pinot Noir fan. For me, like Pinot Noir is a little bit more feminine compared to like a Syrah. Like Syrah is like more masculine.
Okay, I get it.
So yeah, so we're still talking about like we're talking about a white grape, and we're talking about a white grape that's, rather, light in style, medium bodied, but still light in style. So when the difference is when you go into Portugal is because the alcohol percentages are a little higher, like it just gives up a little heavier, like I like to say, I say masculine is the descriptor that I use, if that makes sense.
That's why I don't drink Portuguese Albariño.
I mean, I think they're great. Like, you need food. Like, they're heavier.
I don't like the extra alcohol.
So, yeah, you need food. Like, you need, like, you look again, like, when Brooke was talking about, like, the coastal influence and everything, the same thing applies in Portugal. We're just south of Spain, but we're also in a lot hotter of a climate, or warmer of a climate, if you will. And so the wines are naturally going to have, like I said, that higher alcoholic percentage. And so they're going to make them to be a little bit heavier, which is great if you want like salty sardines or bocadillos and all those fun things. Like they do great with also Asian food. One thing, like, people always try to ask me, like, well, what do I pair with, like, ramen? What do I eat with Indian food? What do I eat with, like, spicy food? Like, people are really afraid to have white wine with dinner. Like, why is that?
It's so good with so many things.
Why is that? Can I ask, like, why is white?
That's exactly what I was saying. Like, I felt like if it wasn't, I can't even remember, like there was just a few different things. I'm like, okay, I guess I'll have a white wine. Everything else was, if it's dinner time, it was going to be like, that was, and I don't think I had anything to base it on. It just what I would default to.
And you had salmon for dinner, right?
I had salmon for dinner tonight.
Can go either way with salmon.
Yeah.
But that's what I opened this. I had glass one. This, yeah. It was lovely.
Yeah. I mean, you could do Pinot, you can do, that's the thing, but like white wine is perfect with so many foods, and you couldn't actually have most red wines with the foods that white wine go with. I mean, you could have some red wines, but
right.
And it's summer, so really, are you going to be drinking Napa Cabernet like with your salmon?
But like a chilled Grenache,
100 degrees outside, like,
or a Mencia.
Wait, when the heat index is 103 here today in Dallas.
Yeah, that's gross.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, I mean, like, so my husband and I usually, like, it's interesting the way that we, like, cook and eat together. We start out with some white wine to taste, like, our food, depending on what we're eating. Tonight we're having shrimp scampi, so we're going to have a little bit of this Albariño. And then we're going to have, like, a light, like, we're actually going to have a Beaujolais, like, another light red wine. And it's also, like, it was, like, 85 degrees outside today.
Yeah.
I mean, It's been really warm. I know where a lot of you are. Everyone here is in a hot climate right now on this call. So we're all dealing with like a bit of a, I don't know.
Yeah.
I know Laurel, it's been like triple digits. I know, Jimmy, I don't know what it is there. You may have more humidity. I think Jen is also, you're up in like central, like you're in LA, right? Jenny, I think, she's like in LA area.
Jimmy, you should be really interested in what light-bodied reds you can chill and what white wines you can drink with your summer menu, because you should not be drinking any heavy-bodied reds in Texas in summer.
Yeah, it's hot. I swear, I feel like every year, I've lived here the majority of my life, and it's like I have to get reused to it, and it's like, shit, it's already just the beginning of June. And it's 95 and like 103 heat index at like the afternoon already. So
think about it. If you're thinking about a mojito, it is not time for a glass of Cabernet. Okay, that's the rule.
This is where Dave and I would differ. This is why white wine's not becoming an option, because I would sit somewhere and order a tequila when he would order a white wine. And so white wine wasn't on my head. So if I wasn't drinking red, I was thinking tequila.
Aren't you glad you met Nicole? Because tequila's going to put you under that table
wine
really
and
fast.
Albariño, I think white wine is one of those things that are, a lot of men like to write off, and they feel like it's like they have to drink red wine.
Yeah.
And it's so
It makes no sense. It's just an alcoholic beverage.
Like, it's so weird to me because, like, wine to me is food. Like, I want to drink something that will taste great with my food, and I'm not going to drink Cabernet with sushi. So anyway, so I'll wrap it up real quickly, and we can laugh about this. I just want to, like, not for those that are on here for learning purposes, and we can have our giggle factor in a minute. California is really embracing Albariño, and I find it to be awesome because if you look at our climate along Monterey specifically, it is just like, not perfectly like, but it's similar to Galicia, and it's maritime.
And parts of Mendocino too.
Yeah. But Albariño loves the sun. It loves that salty air coming in. It loves all of that. The Salinas Valley is untouched, basically. Like, a lot of people don't really know about it. It is primo area for Albariño. I have a producer that I absolutely love from California. It's called La Marea. And he's a surfer, and he loves, like, the coast. He loves rugged, like, he's just a hardcore dude. His beard's about down to here. But he makes fantastic wines. And I think for those, I used to have it, he used to make it in the draft portion, and I had it up in Encinitas at a couple places. I don't know what's going on with that now. It doesn't matter. I'm going on a tangent. But I just want to end with, like, exploring California for Albariño. And I don't know, Jimmy, they might be doing it in Texas. Texas is an area that is doing a lot of different varietals.
And it's funny, now that I'm doing this, so I have friends that'll go down to Fredericksburg, and that's kind of the wine area here a lot, or nearby. And I've never drank a whole lot of Texas wines or my parents go down constantly. And now, like, I want to take a trip down there, or you guys come in and visit and we all take a trip down there, because I want to know more about what's near me as well now, because I've always just kind of written Texas wine or Fredericksburg, not written it off because I was never just a huge wine connoisseur. Like, obviously I've drank way more wine now doing this kind of things with you guys every week, and I've appreciated getting, like, learning about that. But now I want to know, okay, what is it that Texas does well? What should I be looking for? What is in Fredericksburg or West Texas, or the places where, there are vineyards here as well?
Yeah, I think, well, we'll talk about it when you're in town next week, or whenever you're here. But I think I love, like, I talked about, like, so I just want to make one weird little snippet. When we did the Sangiovese tasting together, and I was talking about the Calatal and how, like, the sommeliers were sort of, like, turning it off after a while because they were just sick and tired of it. But yeah, they're embracing things like Albariño and, these varietals that are popular maybe in their own countries, but lesser known for American consumers. And they're planting them here in the New World, as it's coined. And not next week, but next week is Barbera. And we also grow Barbera in California, and I'm excited to sort of talk about that as well. And the following week is going to be on Vermentino, which is another varietal that we grow in California. And I'm excited to share that, because there are California producers that are not just doing Sangiovese, because Sangiovese, for whatever reason, like, got, like, no, I'm tired of that. In California, the Somms just got tired of that, but they're really starting to open up to these more obscure grapes, if you will. And so that's why I want to continue with these tastings, to continue to talk to you guys and expose you to the fact that, like, hey, yes, it's old world, but you can also find it in California, which is fun.
It's very cool.
Yeah, there's some really cool, crazy, rare Italian grapes being grown in Sonoma County.
I know.
And Mendocino.
Yeah. Yeah, and Brooke lives in Sonoma, and so I remember you worked for that one Zinfandel.
He does Barbera and Sangiovese and blends, but I've been up and also really rare Italian grapes. Very interesting.
So I think it'll be fun to sort of dive into these traditional grapes and seeing what's happening in California and other regions, in Oregon as well, and Washington, sorry. Don't want to cancel out Washington, because we are doing it domestically and we are doing it like beautifully. So anyway, any questions before we all, anything anybody wants to share?
It's been great. Super informative.
Yeah, thank you.
Anybody going to Spain anytime soon?
Not anytime soon.
Right.
You need some suggestions? Okay, maybe not until fall, but earliest.
It just got moved up the list. We'll put it that way.
Right. Yeah, totally. But I think, like, just building on Jimmy's comment too, I think that's a lot of what, we're trying to do here, is just build curiosity, and build a, like, I don't know, I've never had that before, but I heard about it. Let's try it. Something new, something different. Nicole talks a little bit about this guy. Is it Evan? Is that his name? The guy with the beard?
Oh, Ian. Who's
I was close.
does a lot of French and Spanish varietals. Yes.
Yeah, and you once you get close to the wine community, you get to meet people like this, and you just, like, they're mostly farmers. Like, that's what they're farmers, and they're eccentric often. A lot of times it's just generational, that they've been doing this in their families for years and years and years, and this is the great grandson of the person who first dug out the rocks out of this hill and said, let's plant some vines here and see what we can do. And there's just so many great stories, and as you start to get more into it, I think you start to connect more with those small family, those types of people, and you just realize they're just farmers. Like, I don't think I really realized that before I got close to wine, that it's just farming. I'm growing tomatoes and they're growing grapes, and they've got a lot more work to do than I do with the tomatoes.
We've glamorized them a lot.
Yeah,
It's
really.
totally glamorized. Like, that's like the thing that bugs me the most, is how glamorized it is. Like, it is really, like, when you want to have true, honest, really good wine, you've got to go shop at your local shops and talk to your, industry people like myself and yourself, Brooke. You can't get that experience like when you buy a bottle from the grocery store.
No. Well, also because the places that make it into the grocery store are so big.
Right. Or listen to, like, the new trend, the Instagram influencers. It was interesting. Like, Dave and I had, like, one of the Instagram influencers, like, top red Beaujolais. Like, everybody, like, all the influencers got dealt that bottle. And, like, I was, like, tasting it last night, and we're just like, there's no soul. There's just no soul.
Yeah, but the thing is, they don't care. They don't know. Their palate isn't developed enough to know whether it's good or not. And obviously, the people who buy it that follow them, not either. So
Right.
if they enjoy it, no problem.
We did it for kicks. I always think, like, it's always smart to taste a lot of things, and and it also sharpens your palate, is what I also say. I'm a big proponent of sharpening your palate. Buy something inexpensive and then buy something expensive and taste them side by side, and then you let me know.
Right. Or even like you always say, and I agree with this completely, which is small producers versus really big commercial producers. You don't need to spend a lot of money to make this comparison, but pretty fast you're gonna realize when you start realizing, this doesn't really taste like much. If you taste a lot of small production wines and then suddenly you taste a bunch of commercial wine, you're gonna suddenly start tasting a product instead of a wine. And you're gonna very quickly
boom, product instead of wine.
Like just a commercial product.
Product instead of wine. Perfect. That is like exactly, you know, like exact. And the same thing can be said. I don't want to like go on a tangent about like cheese, you know, all this thing, you know, all this can be said about like all these products that we get from the EU that we cannot like replicate.
I mean, just think about.
Well, we do, but we just can't afford them here.
We just had a conversation recently about garlic, right, with a mutual friend of ours, Tia. And like all of a sudden, the garlic we have in the stores is dramatically different than what we've had in Vons. In the last month, the garlic is beautiful. It's got pink, those purple veins in it. It tastes totally different. It's just it's bigger, better. Well, the garlic we were getting was coming from China instead of just up in Gilroy, you know, where it's amazing. And so all of a sudden we start to get this different product. People get in their hands and go, oh, wow, this is totally different. Why is the garlic purple all of a sudden? What's going on with that, you know? And then you start to realize that you're just dealing with a different level of production. You're not dealing with these mass-produced, you know, garbage, really. I mean, you're dealing with people who really care. And when people really care about what they're doing, they just do a better job. It's just not that complicated. You don't need winemaking it's beautiful and it's complex, but at the end of the day, it doesn't require more is better. That's not the equation.
If you can drive a car in the tank, it's too big of a winery.
Right.
And there are a lot of wineries who have those big of tanks.
Absolutely. When I remember when going to Duckhorn, and it's okay if you like Duckhorn, that's all right. But I remember like hanging out with the winemaker, and he was like on his laptop, and he was like pushing a button. And he was like, "I'm doing a pump over right now," and I'm like,
"It's crazy! It's crazy!"
Which is a major process.
By your computer, you're doing a pump over. Like meanwhile, I have worked harvest 3 seasons like with the Touchards, and I'm doing a pump over, dragging a hose over my shoulder, climbing up a ladder and putting it in the tank. And this guy's hanging out on his computer and being like,
isn't that some of the argument though between like Channel Island surfboards and say Josh Hall? And that's not to say that a Channel Island surfboard is bad.
Right.
Absolutely.
You know, they just found their thing and they, you know.
Absolutely. That's the correlation that I like cry about and love.
But you're not eating the surfboard, right? Like,
Jen understands my sentiment.
But
like, you know, there's a feeling that you get when you're supporting like something that's like handcrafted. Like, you know.
But with wine, it's not just the feeling; it's also the flavor and the taste.
And that.
I think as coming into this whole thing as a like novice, like much more of a spirits drinker than a wine drinker coming into this thing, is realizing that these smaller producers in this family think it doesn't have to be super pricey either. Like just because there's more heart and soul and care into it, you would assume that's less produced. You would think they could justify charging you a lot more. And what I'm realizing is there's a ton of quality out there that's super affordable or the same price as this mass-produced stuff.
Yeah, just get it from other countries and you're going to get great prices on great quality. We can't afford to do low-priced quality stuff here, unfortunately. Right. I mean...
Yeah, the stuff like in the grocery store, like, you know, they're going through a couple different tiers in order to get there. And it's also a paid-for slot. Like, so, like, when you shop at a local store or a local online shop or whatever it may be, they're not going to at all like buy based upon like some sort of scheme or some sort of like influence, if you will. When you go into like Safeway or some of the bigger, even some of the liquor stores, if you will, some of the big liquor stores, they are like sometimes buying upon deals. Like, okay, so you want to carry this Pinot Grigio? Well, you're gonna have to buy this and this and this and that.
And we'll give you 3 cases free if you buy this.
Yeah, we'll give you 3 cases of like some bullshit, like some like, you know, some wine or spirit like infused with whatever the heck, like that you'll never be able to sell, you know, and it's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. And this is why I always say shop at a wine shop. Local wine shop.
I mean, just from a marketing perspective, if they have enough money that they're willing to have they have enough money to have a TV commercial or billboards, or they're starting to hand out bottles to the influencers.
Don't buy it.
Yeah.
That's going to be something that's produced on such a massive level. It's not a 5,000 case production. That's a 1,000 case plus.
You're talking a million. You're like a million.
Yeah, sure, exactly. And so you just can tell, like, that's just not going to be a high quality product. It's not about quality; it's about quantity. It's about how much you produce.
But then you can also, if you like it, it's okay.
In my terms, it's about moving boxes. Yeah. Is what that's about. Like, to me, that is not about turning someone on to an experience. Like, moving boxes, really? This is how we're selling wine? Really? Like, that's gross. Like, that just does not, like, translate to me. Like, to me, like, it's more of a handheld experience. Like, I want someone to fall in love with the product. Like, moving boxes, like, is, okay, Miller Lite, you know? Like, that's moving boxes.
But that's okay for supermarkets because that's their audience, and that's okay because those people enjoy it, and who cares, right?
But this is the point of these little talks, is to try to get people to like realize, okay, I'm at the supermarket, but maybe I can like go to a different locally owned supermarket or whatever, or maybe I can have wine delivered, or maybe I can just make an extra step and find a better bottle of wine. You know,
lots of options these days, and more starting every day. The world in alcohol is opening up currently.
Absolutely. The amount of things that you can get delivered now is fantastic. I mean, I look at some of my friends that message me and they want to buy my wine and stuff, and they're like, I don't see it in any like grocery stores, and I'm like, you never will. You're gonna have to like have it delivered. And they've started to not you, Jen. Some of my other friends that are just like, I don't want to like make an extra step, and to be able to have it like delivered right at your doorstep is, I think, where our world is sort of turning to. Yeah. I mean, I did it yesterday or the other day. Yeah, it was yesterday. With some like makeup. I needed some makeup, and they're like, we're not open, but you can come by for curbside pickup. And I was like, awesome. I don't even want to go into your store anyway.
Even wineries in Europe now, laws are changing and shipping companies are becoming more evolved. And like, I work with clients who literally ship wine from Europe directly to people. So things are getting easier.
I think so. Well, anyone have any other questions? I'm looking at the time and.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Who loves Albariño?
Yeah, me, absolutely.
I'm gonna go sit on the back deck and have one more glass. So thank you very much.
Me too.
I'm gonna go cook scampi now.
Nicole's is all gone.
Well, I did share it with my husband.
All right.
Okay.
But you have bottle 2 on the way. You've already told us that, so.
Yeah, I'm opening up some Mencia right now, which is another Galicia grape. So.
I love
Awesome.
Mencia.
Thank you, guys.
Ciao.
All right, everybody. Thanks again. We'll see you all
I
next
hope to see you next week. I hope to see you guys. We're gonna do Barbera.